I'm Beth Neville. This is Art and Life. So thankful for you watching and for our beautiful weather. Today we're going to be exploring acrylic painting, a very interesting media because it has very diverse uses and can do many things, but I find it a very difficult media. We're going to first look at an acrylic painting that I did a number of years ago in a series about earth, air, fire, and water. And this one is about water. It's 4 feet by 6 feet in size, and I try to explore all the clouds, the kinds of clouds, a tornado that you might use or see if you were thinking about wind as a symbol. In a very different vein, these are 12 paintings, 9 paintings, that I did as a publicity for our garden club sale. And these are also acrylic. Now what I want to point out here is how different this is. First of all, I was using a gold ground behind the acrylic paint, but it's a good demonstration of how diverse acrylic painting can be. Here it is, flat, bold, very bright, and especially I want you to look at this painting over here, because this is a type of effect that acrylic is very good for. There's silver background, then I painted the white paper whites, but if you'll notice on the vase, I was able to put sort of a, not a glaze, but a very watery white over the top to indicate that there was water in this jar. And that would be very difficult to do with oil paint, but it's quite simple to do with acrylic. So this gives you an idea, I think, of how diverse the imagery can be and the way the paint is applied. In order to understand what acrylic is capable of doing as a paint media, you need to know the difference between transparent, translucent, and opaque. Opaque is very easy to understand. If I hold up this board, light cannot get through this board. It is opaque. So you can use acrylic paint so that it's solid enough to be not allow the canvas to be seen through the paint. We'll demonstrate that in a minute. It can also, it's not transparent. Transparent, you can see right through the glass. So acrylic paint, because it is a media and it's got thickness to it, it's never genuinely transparent. Another good example of transparency is stained glass. I used to do stained glass, and I don't know whether you can see the light shining through it, but stained glass is just a perfect example of translucency, trans meaning across and lucent meaning light. Another example of translucency is using tracing paper. If we put tracing paper down over this drawing, this photograph, we can still see the photograph through it, but it has kind of a film over it. So acrylic paint can be used either as an opaque media or as a translucent media, where the canvas actually the color of the canvas kind of comes through underneath. All right, we're going to get out, change our equipment here, and we'll explore this further. Now, what can we paint on? What can be the ground or the board that we use for acrylic paint? It's traditional to use it on canvas. This is the smallest piece of stretch canvas with a wooden back. So that's very traditional. But you can also paint on watercolor paper. And my favorite media to paint on is Dutch etching paper. Etching paper has a big, heavy fiber, and it's a stiff paper. It doesn't warp. So I find that if I'm using acrylics in a translucent way, that I do like painting on paper, of thick paper, not thin, floppy paper. It's got to have some real depth to it. You can also paint on boards. This is a little piece of fiber, a plastic foam core. You could paint on that. And as I demonstrated just a few minutes ago, you can actually take, this is a piece of a heavy duty, I'm not quite sure what kind of Bristol board, whatever this is, and I covered it with a gold paint that gives a nice wavy texture, and so those Christmas decorations publicity were painted on this, a white on the back, gold on the front. I find gold is the best. Silver also worked. You saw some of those painted in silver. All right, now we're going to get out some of the paints, and I'm going to try to demonstrate on some of these boards and papers what acrylic can do. So we're going to start with, this is a rather inexpensive piece of watercolor paper, not terribly expensive. One of the most important things about acrylic paint is it does not come out of your clothes. Once it dries, it's a plastic. It's not an oil base, it's a water-based media, and it will not come out of your clothes. Even if you get some on and you almost immediately try to wash it out, it's very difficult. So therefore, I am going to get my apron on, which I have had for many, many years. A tie-dyed apron given to me by some painting class members when I lived down on Long Island. And we're going to see if we can protect my clothes. I should really kind of pull up my sleeves a little bit too. So let's see if we can get into this media. I like to be organized about my paints, and so I keep them, since I'm not always painting with acrylic or sumie or oil, I try to keep all my supplies organized. And this is the box that is going to hold my acrylic paints. And it says up here, acrylic paints and tubes. Now to get further organized, there are probably about 50 tubes of paint in here, 40 or 50. I find if they're all just jumbled together, and I just am working with, say, blues and greens, it takes forever to sort them out. So I also sort them by color in these plastic bags. And that saves a lot of time. We have to remember doing artwork. It takes so much time to do anything. It's just beastly time consuming. So anything you can do to speed up the process is very helpful. So there are some more tubes in here. These are the silvery reflective paints, silver, gold, and bronze. We'll put those over to one side. Okay, so now, so here are the paints out here. And here, these are all the reflective paints over there. Now, what are you going to put the paint in? Years ago, we were able to buy palettes like this, and I haven't been able to find one for years. I love this system. Saks Paint Saver palette system. Wow, it was just amazing. You bought these plastic throwaway rims that fit into this, and then there's a plastic top that went on top, and you put a wet sponge in here. And the idea was that it would help to preserve the paints from one time to the next. Well, as far as I can tell, these people pretty much went out of business, but I still mix my paints in here. And in order to stir the paints around and do mixing, I found that popsicle sticks are really almost indispensable. If you mix them with a paintbrush, it's the equivalent of a palette knife. Think of it that way. The little popsicle sticks would be substitutes for a palette knife. Now, what is the problem with acrylic? The problem is it dries so fast. You really have to know what you're doing and where you're going because it is such a fast drying paint. And unlike oil or watercolor, once the tube hardens up, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. So let's start with this red. Now, it's been some time since I've painted with acrylics, so I'm not sure that each one of these is viable, got anything going in it. Most brands of acrylic paint, Liquitex, Golden, Blick, so on, are pretty good. But I do like the big name brands better than the cheaper ones. All right, so we're going to squeeze out, we have to have a water source. Yes, here's our water source. All right, jar, hopefully that we won't tip over. And for this medium, I try not to spend a lot of money on my brushes because what happens is the acrylic gets into the center of the brush and hardens up. And once it hardens up, there's absolutely nothing you can do with it. So you'll see on this brush, if I'm bending down like that, the center is still flexible. But from here to here, it's as hard as a rock. And there's nothing you can do to get rid of it and soften it up again. So we're going to squeeze out a little bit of this. This color is an orangish red. It's called, what is this thing called here? Naphtha Red Light. Okay. Now, the most important thing with acrylic paint is as soon as you squeeze it out, you put the cap on immediately. You do not wait. You'd be amazed. By the time you finish painting with your red, this is going to begin to harden up. And acrylic caps fit pretty well, unlike oil paint where you can have more trouble with the cap. All right, we're going to use this paint several ways. I'm going to dampen the brush. I'm going to use it first so that it's opaque. I'm just not thinning it down. Is this visible, Robert?
Yes.
And by the way, thank you to Robert Neville, my husband, who is the videographer, and to Tom Pilla from Milton Cable TV, Access TV, who helps me with the editing. So if this dries, you would not be able to see through it. Now we're going to do something interesting with this. We're going to add a lot of water over here. All right? And when we do that, it becomes a very different paint. It becomes more like watercolor. And depending on how much water we add, we can continue to add water, and you're going to see how it begins to thin out and get lighter. More water. It begins to change color and become lighter and lighter. And we can get this very, very light. We can get it almost to a pink phase. So what a range of possibilities. I mean, that's just absolutely fantastic. You go all the way from totally opaque to very, very translucent media. And it just, these color variations are so much fun to work with. But so if you can struggle with the fact that the paint dries so quickly, you do have a great range. Now, unfortunately, I left my white paint upstairs. That was a mistake. So I'm not going to be able to show you what happens when you add white. But what we will add is, we're going to go add a little bit of yellow. All right, and here's a disaster. This brand, Winsor Newton, one of the best and most expensive, had a different kind of cap, and it's kind of off. So this tube, yellow ochre, I probably paid, quite a bit of money for it. It's as hard as a rock, just like a rock. Nothing you can do with this, nothing. Because the top came off, it dried out. There's only one thing you can do with it, throw it away. It's useless. It will not dissolve with water. You can't crack it up and add water to it the way we can with watercolor paint. It is dead and gone. So, boom, out that goes. Now, let's find one. This one, much better. This was $6.25, Liquitex, a yellow. The cap has been firmly on it and it has not dried out. So we're going to put out a little bit of this yellow next to it, next to the red. Okay, there it is. All right, put the cap on right away. Okay, now here's where our little stir stick comes. So how are we going to mix these two together? And this is where acrylic becomes very, very tricky. You don't want to waste too much paint. So I'm just very gradually adding that reddish orange to the yellow. Now we go back to our brush and we have to figure out how much water we want in there. That's another question. So there's a beautiful color. My goodness, that's a gorgeous color. All right, there it is, opaque. And again, we can continue to add water to this and it will become a lighter and lighter color. As we move down, I'm going to speed this up, see if I can really get down. Oh yes, there it is. What a gorgeous color. you can see why people fall in love with acrylic. It's just so exciting a color, and it's a fast media once you get used to it. I want to show you an example. This is one of my favorite paintings. It's a large circle, 36 inches in diameter, and it's the hydrangeas and Shasta daisies out in our yard. And in this one, the paint was used this way over here, as if it were more like a watercolor. So supposing we're going to paint a daisy, let's just say, no, we'll call this a, what do we call this? Black-eyed Susan. All right, that's what we'll do. So we can get in here with our paint. Nope, that was probably a mistake. But anyway, we're painting the petals of the Black-eyed Susan. Now, while it's still a little damp, you can begin to play around with it a little bit if you wanted. And it doesn't blend the way watercolor would be. Watercolor, if you did wet on wet with watercolor, it would go right on out. But you can do a little bit of tinting while it is still damp. Now we're going to, let's put a center in here. This is kind of fun. So we're going to go into our browns here. This is a Van Dyke red. No, we don't want a red. We want a brown. It's red orange. What do we got here? Magenta? No. Burnt umber. Let's see if there's, boy, this tube is just about gone. Let me see if there's anything left in this tube. Yes. And what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to use it right out of the tube. I'm just going to dab in here. All right, so we're going to do our center with the burnt umber. Now, what you'll notice is, unlike watercolor, when we come out here with this paint, you can go right over the top of the orange, and it will not bleed, as the, ooze off as much as it were watercolor. All right, that's kind of ugly, I have to say. I think that's pretty ugly. All right, so let's see if we can do something with this. So we're going to dabble in some of our orangey red, and maybe kind of do an orangey. I think it's still pretty unattractive. I don't care for that very much. Anyway, a little bit on the yucky side. All right. Oh, dear. Not every demonstration is a good one. Let's see what would happen. Let's see what would happen let's see if we can rescue this. All right. Oh, I think maybe we can rescue it. All right, by bringing the brown out around the orange, I think maybe we could rescue that. Yeah, that helps a lot. Now let's go back to this and see if we can do maybe a little bit of this. What can we do here to rescue this? A little more water. All right, now if this had some green leaves around it, I'm hoping you can see why acrylic is so attractive. You just could not do this in watercolor. You would have a great big horrible mess on your hands. Whereas with the, look at the clarity of the color, look at the translucency, the opacity in here, and it just blends so beautifully. I just don't think you could achieve this with watercolor. Now, some watercolor expert could probably say, "Oh, no, I could do that with watercolor," but I just think this is why I have found acrylic to be such an attractive media, and have done so much with it. Now, let's see if I can demonstrate how another way of using acrylic. I have used it, particularly with the painting behind me, in a pointillist technique. So pointillism means ... This is a painting that I dearly love. It's now out in the Los Angeles area. It's called The Great Wave, and it's done at the same time as the air painting. And here, this 4 feet by 6 feet, a surfer's wave, is done with thousands of little dots and skeins of paint. So let me see if I can show you how that was done. We've got just a little bit more time here. If I can get into my blues. Yes. All right. There's a blue, deep violet. That would be useful. Let's see if there's anything left in here. Light blue. Okay. So this is how I did this one. No, this is hardened up. The tube was practically empty, and it's as hard as a rock. Okay, now I need to remember to buy this color. This is very important, permanent light blue. I have to remind myself to buy that. All right, cobalt is feeling pretty good. You can squeeze the tube. If the tube is squishy, then you know the paint is still pretty good. So we're going to put out a little bit of blue. All right, and tap on firmly right away. Don't worry about getting on your hands. You can wash it off with soap and water. It's going to come off. So that's not a problem. On your clothes, it's a problem. Okay, this is deep violet. And I do wish I had my white down here in the studio, but we can't put on that. We don't have it. All right. So what you can do with this paint, I'm not going to mix it this time. You can go dab, dab, dab. Wow, this does need water mixed with it. Okay, it's looking like grape jelly. Funny. And I've actually painted a 70-foot painting, acrylic painting, 70 feet long, using this technique of small dots. It took me 5 months. Right, Robert?
That's right.
Remember that? 5 months to paint the 70 feet. It's a fabulous painting. It's been exhibited in various parts of the United States. If anybody wants to buy a fabulous painting, give me a call. All right, now we're going to put some blue in there. So this would be dried up, and now comes the blue dots in between the maroon, and they can overlap a little bit, but each dot maintains its own integrity. And then if we had our white paint, we would come in and paint in between those dots. So let's see here if we have something else to substitute in. Let's see, is this silver? No. That's black. What's this one? This might work. Oh yes, this is a silver. Oh, this will work. Okay. Let's see if we can still get some life out of this. All right, and just a few more minutes here. I think we can finish up this demonstration. Okay, we're going to add a little bit of water to that silver because it looks pretty stiff. If it still has some stiffness, you can add water to it and kind of get it going again. But if it's rock solid, you can't do anything with it. Okay, let's pretend. All right, we're going to mix in some water here. All right, and now we would come in with the silver in the spaces. So we're going to get and supposing I were doing, it's hard for me to say what this would be, but we keep going here, adding more dots, and begin to build up a dot at the surface. So this could be part of a mountain range, could be, but you can imagine why it took me 5 months to paint 70 feet. The height was 5 feet, and each one of those panels was 7 feet long. So the panels were 5 by 7, and there were 10 of them. There are 10 of them. Painting still exists. So I think we can see this is very attractive. I like this very much. I think very attractive kind of coloring. And then probably you could go back with the red if you wanted to, with a maroon, and get a different color. And here we could get pink. So we could fade off into a different kind of coloring over here. We could make this more and more opaque over here, more blue. So over here it could get dark. And more blue, so on and so forth. So you can see how you could modulate your color so that you went from a very opaque look over to a very silvery light look. You can also do this. You can also, just treat it more the way you would a watercolor and blend that way. Let's see if we can very quickly demonstrate this, and then I think we're going to have to wind this up. Okay, so with the addition of more silver, you can also paint it. This would be more like painting with oil paint. So that gives you even, so you have 3 different ways here of painting, and many more besides. You could put a wash over the top with a watered down acrylic if you wanted to blend that all together. So I hope this shows you a little bit about acrylic paint. Next week we're going to do oil paint, a very different media, which doesn't dry. It's slow drying as opposed to quick drying. Now, one last thing. What you have to do immediately is to wash off your brush. If you don't, and keep your brush in the water. If you don't, within 10 minutes the brush will begin to harden up. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you, Robert, for the filming, and we'll see you next week to explore the qualities and dimensions of oil painting. Beth, Neville, Art and Life, thank you for watching.